Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Investing Sucks. So, I want to do a video on this article that I came across recently that really sparked my interest, and it's about RRSPs and specifically are RRSPs scams? Are not really scams per se, but are they not as effective at mitigating taxes as some people may think they are, or as we've been led to believe? And the reason this sparked my interest was this was kind of a thought I had a while back when I was debating myself whether or not I should start to contribute to an RSP and if I should open one up because I currently don't have one as of yet. And I was thinking about it, and in my mind, I did kind of envision some future scenarios where using an RSP may actually not end up to me saving on taxes, and I may actually end up paying more taxes as a result of using one, which, kind of led to me to think, are RSPs actually legitimate? Are people using them properly, or are they scams even, which is kind of an extreme way to put it. But it did spark my interest a little bit. And it was interesting to see this article come up that kind of talks about this and talks about the different arguments related to this. So basically how an RSP works, I'm sure most of you watching probably already know this, but for those who don't, is it's a tax deferral scheme. So how it works is you open up an account, you contribute money to it, and when you contribute money to it, you get to use that money as a tax deduction. So it reduces your taxable income for the year that you contribute that money to the account. Or if you contribute it 2 months after the year, you can then, when you're filing your taxes, you can elect to have that count towards the previous year. So you contribute money into it, and then it's like an investment account. You can accrue investment income on it. You can build up the account, and then ideally when you retire, you're going to withdraw that money, and that's when you pay taxes on. You pay taxes on the withdrawals, but you save on taxes when you contribute money. So it's a tax deferral scheme. And ideally, how most people want to use them is you contribute in the years where you're in a higher income tax bracket, and then withdraw in the years where you're in a lower income tax bracket, which for most people is going to be when they're retired. Because not everyone, but most people in retirement, they're going to be earning a lower income versus when they were working and they're earning a higher income because maybe they had a job, they're employed, whatever the case may be, right? Everyone's life is different, so not everyone's going to follow that exact trajectory. But I think a lot of people fall into that category where you're probably in your peak earning years when you're in your 40s or 50s. So that's when you'd want to contribute. You're in the highest income tax bracket. And then maybe you're earning less money in retirement, which is when you withdraw. So then you save money by contributing at a high bracket and then withdrawing at a lower one. So that's how it works. Those are the basic mechanics. I'm sure most of you probably already know that. So that sounds pretty great. Why would this be a scam? What cases are people making as to why this would be a scam? Well, the thought that I had initially was I could see a situation where when you withdraw, your tax bracket is higher than what it was when you contributed. And maybe that's just due to poor planning, or maybe that's because something external happened that was outside of your control. So, for one, it's hard to know exactly how much money you're going to be making throughout the rest of your life, which, if you're trying to optimize how much money you're saving on RSP, it does kind of require you to know that. I mean, generally, like I just said, most people are going to earn the most money, 40s, 50s, and then less money when they retire. But not everyone does that. And the other thing you have to consider is what if the income tax brackets change? And what if the government of Canada raises the tax rates that we're paying? That's also a possibility. So this article basically illustrated that point pretty well. And they went to this section here and they pulled up this data here, which talks about what the income tax brackets were going back 20 years. So they have 2019, which is when the article wrote, which this is pretty much the same as what it is currently. I don't think there's been any major changes to Canada's federal income tax brackets. And then this is what it was about 20 years ago. So 2000 to 1999. And they give one example here of saying someone who made 40,000 in 1998, they would have paid 6.6 thousand in federal taxes on that income, which is a rate of 16.6%. And then they adjusted it for inflation into 2019. So in the same terms of purchasing power, $40,000 of income now comes just under 60,000 in 2019. They would pay 7.8K in federal taxes, which is 13.1%. So it went from 16.6 to 13.1%. So the tax rate actually went lower in this case. So I thought, okay, maybe that's just one scenario. What about other future scenarios? So I kind of did my own analysis on it. So this is the same income tax data here. And then I compared 1998 to 2000 to 2019, and then the difference in the various income tax brackets. Now, the reason I have them going so high, for example, 300K, 200K, 100K, is because I wanted to see if this narrative that Canada often perpetuates, or maybe a lot of people say Canada needs to do, which is the whole tax the rich thing, right? Now, the way Canada would tax the rich is by having higher income taxes on people who earn higher incomes because there's no wealth tax. So you can't tax people that way. Of course, there's estate taxes and luxury taxes on purchases of certain luxury goods, which I don't know if anyone actually ends up paying those, but whatever the case may be. So I wanted to see does this narrative actually true? Are taxes being raised on the higher income earners? But what I found was across the board, you could see people are paying less taxes currently than they were 20 years ago. So for example, someone who earned 300K in 1998, they would have paid about 81,000 in federal taxes. And in 2019, it went down to 76,000. And this is just assuming, no income adjusted for inflation, just you're earning 300K back then, and you're earning 300K now. And it's the same thing across the board, right? We can see whatever bracket you're in, you're paying less in taxes today than you were 20 years ago. So that kind of bodes well for the RRSP argument because it would be better if you would be paying less tax in the future because if you're thinking, okay, taxes are going to be lower in the future, I'm paying higher taxes now, I'm going to contribute to my RRSP now, so that way when I withdraw in the future, I'm withdrawing at a lower tax bracket and I'm saving more taxes by contributing today. So that would be kind of the rational argument. But what I also found was because, this is just 20 years, right? Most people, they're going to live longer than 20 years. Their working lives are going to be longer than 20 years. I mean, if you start working when you're, say, in your early 20s and you work till you retire, that's about 40 years, right? So looking back 20 years doesn't really tell the full story. So how did it trend prior to that? So then I found this data here. This was an article that was actually posted by Stats Canada back in 2003. I have no idea how I ended up finding this, but I did somehow. And they're basically showing the trend in taxes from the 20-year period before this, so the 1980s to the early 2000s. And this dark blue line here is economic families. This basically just means families. And then this light blue line here is unattached individuals, so just individual people. So what you can see is, yes, taxes got lower from kind of the late 1990s to 2003, or it kind of, I guess it didn't really go lower. And this is just the average, by the way. So this isn't looking at individual brackets. This is the average of all people. But there is an upward trend. I mean, you can see pretty clearly there's an upward trend. In the 1980s, it went up, especially in these years here. Like people were paying more and more taxes, regardless of who you were throughout the 1980s. It then kind of went down in throughout the 1990s, and then late 1990s, it went back up, and then it went down. And as you can see here, it's kind of been on a downward trend since then. And this was a little surprising for me to see because, for one, so this is Canada government spending. I was kind of expecting taxes to be raised in the future. I wasn't expecting to see this unpredictable up and down trend. I was expecting it to kind of go in line with government spending, which is right here. And we can go back even further. Government spending for a long time has been going up and it keeps going up. This needs to be financed somehow. They can't just keep running deficits forever. I mean, maybe they can, I don't know. But it's going to be either financed by increased taxes, which can come from more immigration into Canada, so more people paying taxes, or you raise taxes on existing citizens, or both, right? That's one way to do it. You pay for it with taxes, or you just run greater deficits. So, based on this, and we have seen, especially in recent years, 2020 throughout 2021, there was massive deficits because of all that government aid that was sent out to, because of that thing that happened. But what I was expecting to see was taxes go in line with this, which is not really what the case was. So I was a little surprised to see this. But tying this back to the RRSP argument, this does make it a bit, not necessarily a scam. I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a scam, but it does kind of prove that RRSPs are a little bit complicated. They're much more complicated than TFSAs, where it's very simple. You just put money in and then earn money in the TFSA account. And when you withdraw it, it's tax-free regardless, versus RRSPs. For one, it's a bit, the way your contribution room to an RSP, the way it gets calculated is a whole other topic that you'd have to look into the tax code in order to find, which if anyone has ever tried to read the tax code, you'll know that it's not exactly a friendly read. For example, I pulled up this here, which is just a random section of the tax act that I go to. In fact, we would go to we can go back to the homepage and we can look at the tax act. So let's say we were just trying to pick a random part of the tax act and just read it. So let's pick a random section, just to give you an idea. I had the pleasure of studying this stuff in school, and wasn't my favorite course. There are definitely more entertaining ones, but let's just pick a random one so you can get an idea of the language that's here. Okay, let's read this. Notwithstanding any in this part, there may be deducted in computing the income for a taxation year of a credit union, the total bonus. You can see, I don't have to read the whole thing. You can see what I mean. Like, this stuff is extremely difficult to understand. No possible person, or no normal person is going to be able to read this. This is why the job of tax accountant is one that exists. It's because it's very hard to do. So the average person shouldn't be reading the Tax Act. They're just going to hire someone to do it. But the average person does need to know how to plan for retirement, which is kind of what RRSPs are a big part of that. And if you don't know what tax rate you're going to be paying in the future, because it seems to fluctuate a lot, and you don't know how much income you're going to be earning in the future, because not everyone knows exactly how their life is going to turn out, then it gets it's a pretty daunting task. And it's something that, if it's not done correctly, you could actually end up not saving taxes, and an RRSP might not work out for you. So that's why I think some people are very, very anti RSPs, and even calling them a scam is because, well, especially since the TFSA got introduced in 2009, there's now a much better alternative, in most cases. I mean, there are specific cases where an RSP would be useful. For example, if you have 1 year where your income, for whatever reason, is extremely high and you're in the highest income tax bracket and you're never going to be in that income tax bracket again, then it probably makes sense to contribute then, because if you know you're never going to be in that high of an income tax bracket, then you might as well max it out while you can, because then for a fact you're going to be saving, because you're going to be withdrawing money at a lower income tax bracket. That's one scenario, but that doesn't really apply to the average person. The average person, doesn't really have time, or they don't have the financial knowledge to be able to plan this out in the future. But what I will say, kind of as a conclusion of this video, is as a general rule, I think what I said at the beginning still holds true. It makes sense to save your RSP contribution room. This is what I'm personally doing until you're in your years where you expect to be earning the most money, because you don't know what tax rates are going to do. You don't know if they're going to go up or down. That's outside of your control. So that shouldn't even be a consideration as far as I'm concerned. But you should wait until you're in those years where you're earning money in a higher income tax bracket. And then once you retire, assuming that in retirement you're going to be earning less money, that's what you're planning on, versus your peak earning years, that's when you'd contribute. That's one scenario, or there's plenty of other scenarios. For example, they talk about an RRIF, which is something that people do where they transfer their RSP into this RRIF, and then it stands for Registered Retirement Income Fund. That's one option that a lot of people do once they're no longer eligible for the RRSP. There's all tons of considerations in mind. But I do think the TFSAs are much more simple than the RSPs. So anyways, that's just my thoughts on the situation. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section, and if you agree with my take on this, or if you agree with this article. I hope you did find value in this video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe if you're new to my channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video.